What is up guys, Blue Spooky here with another Megamix for you. If you guys are enjoying these longer videos and the daily videos, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you guys end up enjoying the video. It really helps out with the algorithm and helps to make sure I can keep making these videos for the channel for a long time. If you guys have any thoughts about the stories in the video, please be sure to leave a comment, as my favorite part of making these videos is hearing your guys' thoughts about the stories therein. If we could reach about 1,500 likes and 100 comments, that would be awesome, as we've been getting pretty close to that on these sorts of videos in the past few weeks. And without further ado though guys, I will let you get right into the next 2 hours of scary stories, and I will see you guys again at the end of the video. My two favorite things in the world are my dog and hiking. I hike all year round for the most part. Every season brings out a different aspect of nature that I love. My favorite time to hike is right now though. I love that September into October season. It's chilly, but not quite cold. The scenery is beautiful and not dead yet, and the best part is that nobody is ever around during that time of year. I live in a popular tourist area during the summer, but once Labor Day comes and goes, it's like somebody slammed the door shut to the town. Honestly, I absolutely love it. I work from my computer at night, so I try to get outside with my dog every day. I lived in this town for 17 years, and I've hiked every trail available to the public. Even some paths you're not supposed to hike on. In all those years, I've never experienced anything like what happened to me last week. It was a perfectly normal day. I took the dog out at around 10 a.m. and started hiking into the woods behind my house. It's mostly just a forested area, surrounded by a large creek. I don't actually know if it's a private property or a state property, but all of us who live over there by the creek hike these woods, and nobody ever says anything. When we were walking down by the water, my dog suddenly started to growl, and she started to become very irate. This attitude was not like her at all. I tried to calm her down, but she just kept growling and whimpering. While I was trying to calm her, a man ran by us through the creek, then stopped on the other side of the water. I froze for a second out of sheer shock. It scared the heck out of me. It's also not like the creek was just a puddle of water or anything. It was moving fairly quickly, and this dude just jumped in and ran through it like it was nothing. I didn't know if he was paying attention to me, so I tried to hide behind some bushes with my dog. She was growling, but she was quiet enough there was no way someone would hear her on the other side. I peeked through those bushes. The man was still standing on the other side of the creek, except he was clearly now staring right at me. I wasn't sure if he was looking at me specifically or just in the direction he thought I was. That was until he decided to speak. It was like a nightmare come to life. In this low, growling voice, he said, "I see you." I ignored him at first, and then he said it again. Now he just began to repeat himself over and over. "I see you. I see you." In case it's not obvious, I was paralyzed. I was afraid. I continued to try and peek through the bushes. This was clearly some middle-aged man. He wasn't super tall, maybe 5'6" or something, and a little round in the belly. In the blink of an eye, he started rushing toward me. He sprinted across the creek, splashing water everywhere. My poor dog was going insane. At this point, fight or flight mode kicked in. I decided to stand up and step to this guy. When he was inches from me, I puffed up my chest. He stopped dead in his tracks. He was so close I could have hugged him if I wanted to. He gave me this great big smile. I'll never forget those disgusting yellow teeth. Before I could say or do anything, he leaned in a little closer to me and shouted at the top of his lungs, It was the loudest, most blood-curdling scream I'd ever heard. After that, he started to laugh, then ran back across the creek. He basically just stood there, now laughing again. Reception was spotty in these woods, but thankfully I had enough service to call the sheriff, who happened to be a good friend of mine. I decided to stay close to the man till the sheriff arrived. I didn't know if he was dangerous, and I didn't want him running around the woods behind my home. The sheriff arrived several minutes later. Thankfully, I wasn't as deep into the trail as I thought I was. He arrived with 2 other officers, and they slowly approached the man. They weren't aggressive at all. They were just trying to talk to the guy. He must have felt threatened, though, because just like that, he abruptly charged. He tackled the sheriff, which prompted the other 2 officers to take him down. He continued to scream for I don't even know how long, pretty much from the moment they handcuffed him to the moment he was placed in the vehicle. It was kind of sad, honestly. The man didn't even have an ID. The only thing they found on him was some sort of knife, like the ones you would have in a kitchen set or something. He didn't know his name, where he was from, nothing. Maybe he was withholding it. I don't know exactly. I'm not sure what happened to the guy either. I think they called the state and he was relocated to some institution that could actually help him. Since this literally just happened, I really don't have any new information. If I find out something else, maybe I'll write some update about the man and who he was or where he came from. This is a small town, and everybody knows everybody. Wherever this guy came from, he was very clearly an outsider. It's unknown yet if he was using, but even if he was, I don't know if the sheriff would share that information with me anyway. What do you guys think? Do you think this was just some homeless guy who wandered into the woods that day, and by chance I ran into him? Or maybe something stranger? I'm just happy I caught him when I did, and not in the middle of the night or something. Most importantly, I'm glad my dog was completely unharmed. This took place a few years back. During that time, I moved into a new apartment. It had 1 bedroom, 2 bathrooms, and was a lot nicer and larger than my previous one. Shortly after I moved in, I met one of my neighbors. As I was going into the elevator, he told me that his name was Steve. Honestly, he seemed to be pretty nice. I remember we talked briefly, and he said that he lived at the end of my hallway. At the end of our conversation, I remember Steve suggesting we should hang out sometime. I was kind of glad I seemed to have made a new friend so quickly after moving in. I wasn't really sure if I would hang out with him or not, though. That day, I went off to work and got back at night. I went straight up to my apartment and went inside. Things were really quiet now. It was really late. I was hanging out sort of in the kitchen area when I heard the sound of someone walking down the hallway. The only reason I even heard it at all was because it was sort of by the door and my apartment was so quiet. For some reason, I remember feeling somewhat curious. I walked over to the door and looked out the peephole. I just wanted to see who it was walking by. When I looked out, I saw Steve. He was standing there in the middle of my hallway, looking at my door. Honestly, it was really strange to see. After a few seconds, he started walking. I thought he was going to walk away. I figured maybe he was just passing by and going to his own apartment. I didn't know why he would stop in the middle, though. After he took a few steps, he suddenly turned around and moved closer to my door. He got right up next to it. I almost backed away, but I didn't. He was just staring super close at my door. I was sure for a second that he was going to knock on it or something, but he didn't. He just stood right outside looking. He then backed up a bit. And stood at the other side of the hallway. He was still looking at my door, though. He started walking back and forth, almost pacing around. I was kind of surprised at what I was seeing. I didn't really know what to think. To be honest, it was kind of creeping me out. I didn't think he knew I was at the door or anything, though. I decided to back away because I didn't want to keep looking at this. It was freaking me out too much. I tiptoed away from the door as quietly as possible, then went into my bedroom and quietly turned on the TV to distract myself. I couldn't take my mind off it, though. There were still no knocks on the door, and he never tried opening it either. About 5 minutes later, I got up and went back over. I wanted to see if he was still doing that weird stuff out there. He now appeared to be gone, but I still didn't know how to explain what happened. After that, I went to bed. The next day, I got up and was heading to work. Believe it or not, I saw Steve walking down the hallway toward the elevator again. I felt really awkward seeing him. He smiled and said hello to me in a very cheerful mood. I said hi back and asked him how he was doing. He said he was good and asked me what I did last night. I told him I worked late and came home and went to bed. I asked him what he did. He told me he had been gone all night and got back really late after midnight. Well, obviously that was not true. I had seen him in the hallway outside my door at 10 p.m. I didn't ask him anything else, though. After that strange situation, I didn't want to confront him. For some reason, I didn't feel that safe around him. We both went our separate ways, and I went to work. When I got back home, I was a little concerned something else like that might happen. I thought I might want to try to avoid seeing him in the hallways or something. But the crazy thing is, I never once saw Steve again. I kept thinking I would run into him or something, or see him in the building somewhere, but I didn't. After a few weeks, I sort of got to know a few other people who lived in the building. I asked one of them about Steve, and if he still lived there. I was told he didn't live there anymore. He had been evicted several weeks back. They added that he seemed really strange to them. I didn't bother to tell them about my experience with Steve. I found that interesting, though. I'm not sure why exactly he was evicted. I'm just glad he moved out. It was a very strange situation. Luckily, I don't have to worry about it anymore. This just happened a few days ago, and I'm extremely shaken up. Some backstory: I live on the second floor of a 3-level apartment. We have a crawl space that connects all of them together. We aren't sure why it's there, but we all have stuff in it, and none of us would ever attempt to go inside of it. We all felt pretty safe. The other night, the sun was setting, but it wasn't pitch black out or anything yet. I was walking through my living room when I saw a short woman on my fire escape peeking in through my windows. This was extremely bizarre, considering it was still semi-light out, and she had to literally get onto our fire escape somehow. We have 2 windows the fire escape reaches. She was looking in through both, but didn't appear to have seen me. I crawled on the ground, with my heart racing, as I watched her try to open the windows. I didn't know what the hell to do. My phone was in the other room. After what felt like an eternity, she finally left. I went into my room to grab my phone, text my landlord, and call the police. When I came back into my living room, I was looking out the windows to see if I could locate her anywhere, when all of a sudden I began to hear a weird noise coming from the ceiling. We have one of those tile ceilings, made out of separate slabs of cork and wood. I looked up to see one of the slabs being lifted upward and 2 eyes staring down at me. I have no clue how she got into the crawl space so quickly. I grabbed the nearest thing next to me, which was a broom, and started hitting her with it through the ceiling. I called the cops as soon as she crawled away. They showed up and searched the place, but didn't find her until a few days later. They discovered her on someone else's fire escape. The cops said she was definitely on some hard drugs, and she was violent toward them. I'm glad that she's gone, and I'll never have to deal with that again. My family at one time volunteered at a veterans homeless shelter quarterly. It was with a group of people from our church, and we had gone several times. I had a small baby I was wearing on my body with a wrap while serving the food. I would occasionally mingle and talk with the veterans while they all ate their food. One evening, I was speaking with two men at a table when one of them asked me where I lived. I didn't take it to mean anything other than the general town I was from. I figured there was no harm in telling him. It was nowhere near where this shelter was. That was when the other man sitting at the table, who I had never seen before, looked at that guy and told him exactly how to get to my home. He told him the address where I lived. He then looked at me and said, "I used to live on the hill across the road from you. Used to watch you all the time, you and your children." And that was the last time I volunteered anywhere like that. I reported him to the shelter director. Turned out he was a registered sex offender. I found out later that he did in fact live across the road right from us and must have been watching us for quite a while. I've never felt so creeped out in my entire life. This story happened a few years ago. I was in my early 20s, studying in Paris, France. I was going home from uni. I usually took a short bus ride and walked the rest of the way. That day, I felt slightly uncomfortable though. I could sense this guy looking very intensely at me. I was used to some unpleasant and unsolicited gazes, but this time his gaze felt almost beastly. It's hard to explain the feeling. It was almost like a prey being stalked. I decided to get off the bus a few stops early. I wanted to avoid him and didn't want him to discover where I usually got off the bus. Like I learned in the movies, I waited until someone else pressed the stop button and waited until the last moment to stand up and leave. I didn't notice him getting off the bus with me. Just as I was feeling relief of having escaped an uncomfortable situation, I glanced over my shoulder. There he was, a few meters behind me. I had a distressing feeling as his gaze averted away the moment I turned. I walked into a shop, took out my phone, and pretended to be taking a call. When I couldn't see him anymore, I exited and made my way home as fast as I could. I kept looking back in the busy street. I zigzagged, crossed the street at every crossing. Finally, I believed that him getting off the same stop at me was maybe a mere coincidence. I couldn't see him anywhere around me. When I reached my building, I was feeling a bit relieved. I looked back one last time, and there he was. His alarming gaze was upon me, and he had a smirk on his face. I ran up to my apartment, climbing the stairs 4 at a time. I reached the top floor, squeezed through my door, locked it, and froze. My intercom began ringing. Don't ask me why I picked it up. I regretted it the very moment I did so. I could hear the opposite flat intercom ringing as well. He was pressing all the buttons one by one, hoping someone would open, but now he knew my name. Gabrielle? Oh shit, I felt like a deer in the headlights, frozen. Open the door, please. I just want to talk to you, he said in a pleading voice. Somehow I couldn't move or speak. Come over to the window. Look at me. You'll see I'm not a bad guy. Something clicked in that moment. He wanted to locate which apartment was mine in the building. Well, I was not going to make that mistake. I hung up immediately. I waited by the door without moving for what seemed like hours. When I finally managed to calm myself down, I called my long-distance boyfriend. He told me to call the police immediately. Why didn't I call the police in the first place? I don't know. Today, it would be the first thing I would do. Maybe it was the fear of making a big deal of something not important. What an idiot I was back then. I called my best friend instead. I didn't want to feel alone. I told her all about it, and after a while I felt better, safe. We started laughing together, when suddenly the intercom rang again. 2 hours since I'd come home, I answered, and the man spoke once more. "Gabrielle, open the door, please." I still remember the chills I felt. He was still there. After all this time, I was silent, petrified. I could sense the tension. "Gabrielle, let me in. I'm so thirsty. Just give me a glass of water." I hung up on him. I curled up in a corner, literally in recovery position. I was terrified. I waited, too scared to make a sound. I knew he couldn't hear me from the hall, but I was scared to even breathe. The intercom rang again and again and again. I didn't answer this time. I curled up on the sofa until I fell asleep out of exhaustion. I heard the intercom ring one more time in the middle of the night. I woke up the next morning, afraid to even leave my apartment. I called my dad, who came to pick me up. There was no one in the hall, but there was a note in my mailbox. It read this: "Gabrielle, I'm a nice guy. You should have opened the door for me." We immediately went to the nearest police station. The police listened, and of course told me to not hesitate to call them in the future. My dad called a locksmith to install digicode on the building door. He did it the very same day. I wrote a message to each of my neighbors as well, asking them not to open the door to anyone they didn't expect. He sat in the cafe in front of my building every evening for more than a week, but after that I never saw the stalker again. After that episode, I had to use a different route to and from uni every day. I keep my phone tightly in my hand and always look back every few meters. Even today, I'm still very observing of my surroundings, and I never answer the door if I'm not expecting someone. So, people, if you ever find yourself in that kind of situation, call the police immediately. Don't be stupid like me. Be safe out there, everyone. This may be short because I don't remember a whole lot since I was 7 at the time this happened, and my parents never told me much. I'll include the key details I do remember. When I was 7 years old, I went to a small school in our little oil-field town in Alberta. There was this guy named Daniel. I don't know if that was his real name, but when I think of him, my mind always defaults to that. Well, Daniel had slept with my mom ages before I was even conceived. Somehow he got it into his head that I was his child, full-blown delusional. So Daniel decided the smart and rational thing to do was stalk me everywhere. Apparently, he drew out a map to my school, found out my name, figured out how old I was, took photos of what I looked like. I have no idea how he managed to get this much information without being caught. My mom never used any social media or anything, and he lived in a completely different province. Mind you, I had also never met this man before. Daniel decided that one day, he wanted to take it a step further. He had been ranting to his wife about me, and kept telling her I was his kid. He was going to drive from British Columbia all the way to Alberta, grab me, and bring me back to BC with him. He was convinced I was conceived earlier than I was, and I had to be his kid. My mom had made up some conspiracy to hide me from him. He made a whole elaborate plan for how to abduct me, down to the exact date and time he was going to do it. Luckily, his wife decided to call my mom and warned her before he could do so. My mom put various safety measures up, like making sure I was always in groups and I had to be home by 4, etc. I was only told about all of this when I turned 14 years old. I still don't have all the details, and obviously he never ended up going through with his plan. Apparently, Daniel wanted to kidnap me and force my mom to get back together with him. despite my mom having been remarried and him being married as well. What a real creep. When I was younger, I was desperate to fit in, and I would do anything to be considered one of the cool kids. When I was 15, my parents sent me to summer camp. I was excited at the opportunity to make new friends, and hopefully try to convince the other campers how cool I actually was. Maybe even convince myself. When I showed up, I naturally gravitated towards the kids I thought looked the most fun, for lack of a better word. There was a group of 4 guys standing by one of the cabins. They all had shaggy hair and looked like skaters of some sort. At that time, that was what all the cool kids were doing, at least in my mind. The ringleader of this group, which seems like an appropriate way to phrase this, was a boy named Russ. He was wearing a Dallas Cowboys hat backward and was entertaining the other boys with a bunch of jokes. As I approached the group, I started to laugh at his story even though I didn't really get it. My fake understanding of the story, though, was enough to be accepted by all of them. A few days into the camp, it was clear to me I'd made the right choice of cool kids. All the younger campers thought this group was the coolest, and all the campers our age laughed at what we said. We quickly became the funny guys. We were getting in trouble almost daily for fooling around. This was right around the time of Johnny Knoxville on NTV and all that stuff, so we thought we were so awesome doing a bunch of dangerous tricks and stunts all around camp. Russ even managed to convince one guy named Michael to jump off the roof onto a tree, claiming he'd done it 1,000,000 times. Well, Michael did this and the branch snapped, causing him to fall down. I think he actually broke his arm. Russ didn't get in any trouble, and Michael was forced to leave the camp. It was at that moment I started to realize that Russ may not have been quite the cool guy he thought he was. As camp progressed onward, I started getting more annoyed by Russ. Maybe I was growing more mature, or maybe I saw through his little games. Either way, I was kind of going through the motions now. At first, everybody loved Russ, but now everyone was starting to get very fed up with him, much like I was. He was completely obsessed with these pranks, and playing pranks on everyone he deemed to be nerds or lesser than him. One night, our group was sitting around our bunks telling scary stories, and stories about things that happened in our hometown. That's when Russ stepped in and had to one-up us in a confident and arrogant voice. He started to tell us a story. He said, "You guys think those are scary stories? Wouldn't you all like to hear this one? I was waiting for the right time to bust it out, but tonight seems like a good one." I told you guys before that my brother went to this camp years ago. When he was my age, he said that out in those woods, there was an old abandoned shack, not far from here actually. It's in the direction we don't travel for hikes and other activities. It's haunted, actually haunted. The old camp director used to murder his victims in that shack until he was caught and died trying to escape. They say his spirit still haunts it. If you go visit that haunted shack on quiet nights like this, you can hear the ghostly spirits of all those poor souls. I didn't believe his story for a second. I'm not a paranormal guy at all. Apparently, though, the rest of the guys did. They all looked like they were just about to cry. I rolled my eyes and Russ continued with his story. Since I didn't believe my brother, he told me exactly how to get there. If you guys are down, we could go find it right now. There was an immediate protest from the group. I spoke up first. "No way, dude. Not because I'm scared of your dumbass ghost. I'm scared of getting caught and kicked out." Russ laughed and called me something I'm not allowed to share here. They always have a way of manipulating people into doing what they want, those types. After several minutes of debate, he got everybody to agree to go except me. I was of course labeled the coward of the group. He told me, "If you're not scared of ghosts, you won't mind being the one that enters the shack. If you do that, we'll have to tell everyone here how tough and brave you are." Yeah, sadly, that's what he actually said, and it worked on me, more out of anger and annoyance than anything. I agreed to go. We started walking into the thick brush of the forest. Once the camp lights were out of sight, we turned on our flashlights as we traveled through the part of the forest where there weren't any trails. There was barely enough room to even walk. I'm not sure exactly how far we went, but after a while I couldn't believe my eyes. There really was an old decrepit shack, dominated by the nature surrounding it. I started to hear my bunkmates whispering and sharing some banter. I started to think to myself that maybe Russ was telling the truth after all. He demanded that I go check it out. I'm not gonna lie, I was scared. I thought about his story, and even though I don't really believe in ghosts, being around this abandoned shack in the middle of the night after hearing that story would be enough to scare anyone. Honestly, I felt like I was going to pee my pants. I started to get egged on by the group though, shouting stuff like, "I thought you were so tough. What happened to that?" and other forms of mockery. Well, now I just had to check it out. I might as well since I was already out here. I made my way to the door and barged through. I was able to make it inside. This was bigger than a shack. It was more like a small cabin actually, the size of a studio apartment. Inside was completely destroyed. As I walked through, I shined my light, and I noticed something strange on the ground. There was a bottle of beer. I'm not joking. It was cold when I touched it. I could see the perspiration ring from the bottle on the wooden floor. Further in the distance, there was a plastic bag. Coming out of the plastic bag was an open bag of chips. In this moment, I couldn't put the pieces together in my head fast enough. I was intrigued, scared, and confused all at the same time. In the back of the shack seemed to be a small room. When I eventually made it, I stopped and shined the light all around. As the light swept over the corner of this room, I saw a woman standing there. I swear to God, my skin legitimately turned cold. I immediately felt sick. She held her head in her hands, and in a quivering voice she kept whispering, "Don't say anything." She looked angry, like she was threatening me. I heard Russ from outside asking if I was okay. I didn't answer. The woman was shaking her head over and over at me. After a brief silence and against my better judgment, I decided to scream the word "run." I started to run out. I heard the woman start cursing behind me. I didn't turn back, but I could hear her giving chase. When I got outside, I screamed at the group that someone was in there and we needed to get out of there right now. They all looked confused, like I was just messing with them, but once the woman jumped through the doorway screaming at us, we all immediately turned and ran back to the camp. We were met by just about half the staff, who were rubbing their eyes and incredibly upset we had snuck out. I tried to explain to them what happened, tried to explain there was someone living inside the camp, but they didn't believe us. They said they were going to call the parents tomorrow morning, which I was thrilled about honestly. Now I just wanted to go home. The next morning, the camp director came to our bunk. He sat us all down and told us they'd woken up early and went to the shack in the woods. They saw exactly what we described. They even found multiple footprints coming in and out the other direction. For our safety, they ended up calling camp early for everyone, not just our group specifically. They didn't know if it was just the one woman or maybe a group of multiple people. They didn't know if they were dangerous either. It definitely wasn't worth risking our lives. I'm so thankful I got out of that situation unharmed. It's affected me mentally for years. Eventually, I came to peace with the incident. I never spoke with any of those guys again though, especially not Russ. I have no idea what happened to everybody, but it wouldn't surprise me if that idiot's in jail or something. I'll be honest with you guys. Be careful who you trust and hang out with, because they might lead you into a situation that could turn very bad. When I was 14, I had a boyfriend whom my parents would not let me see. I was so in love with him, as any 14-year-old would be. So much so that I decided it would be a good idea to sneak out of my home at 3 a.m. in an attempt to see him. My boyfriend at the time quite obviously did not care about my safety in this situation. He told me to walk all the way to the Taco Bell near his house, which was over a half-hour walk on foot. I was stupid though and really wanted to see him, so I agreed. I remember I put on short shorts and other clothes in an attempt to look cute for my boyfriend. Completely oblivious to how stupid this all was, I managed to get outside my home and started walking down the street. I was nervous, but I seemed to be all alone out there, so I didn't feel too threatened. Right as I was passing the power lines, though, a pickup truck turned onto the road and started slowly driving toward me. The part that scared me the most was when the car turned and stopped right in front of the power lines, basically trapping me in. I saw the man inside the car looking at me. In that moment, I got so scared I just took off running as fast as I could in a random direction. By pure happenstance, I ended up right next to the house of a kid I was friends with from school. I started knocking on his window in a panic. He opened his blinds and I explained what happened. He said he would tell his older brother. I begged for him to drive me down to the Taco Bell, but instead he insisted on driving me home. Needless to say, I did not get to sneak out much that night, and I did never try that again. I still wonder what that guy's intentions were from doing that. In late June, my boyfriend and I, both 19 at the time, were headed back from a Walmart in his town. We lived an hour apart, and I was visiting him. I was driving on somewhat of a back road, and there was this four-way stop. Across from me was what looked to be a work truck, parked right behind another car flashing its brights. No one else was at the intersection, so I decided to go ahead and keep driving. As soon as I pulled out, though, a car came speeding from around a corner, going almost 90 miles per hour in this 30 zone. They almost T-boned my car right on the passenger side. Luckily, I managed to speed up and get out of the way. The car swerved and stopped on the side of the road and flashed its hazards. We were really freaked out. Maybe it wasn't the right thing to do, but I kept on driving. Nobody had been hurt, probably only shaken up. We kept on driving, and my boyfriend was guiding me through the roads. We were both talking about how bizarre it was that we hadn't even seen or heard that other car coming. I noticed there was another car behind us. It was about 1,000 feet back, though, so I didn't really think anything of it. It kept getting closer and closer. Finally, this car was right on my ass. Once he was there, he turned on an extremely bright light that nearly blinded me. We realized it was the work truck that had been across the intersection. I ducked down out of the way of my rear view so I could still see the road and keep driving, even speeding up a little. My boyfriend told me that maybe we should pull over. Maybe somebody was hurt, and they were trying to flag us down. We were on a back road, though, with absolutely no light posts and nowhere to pull in that was well lit. Absolutely not. Eventually, I had my boyfriend hold the wheel for me because I couldn't see at all. The lights were blinding me. My vision was blurry and spotty. I started to pull into a neighborhood, but the truck started passing me. We almost got into another accident. The neighborhood we pulled into was dark, of course. The truck slowed down to a stop and backed up so it was directly behind us, still on the main road while we were parked in this neighborhood. The driver started shining a flashlight at my car, mostly at me. Then it went over to my boyfriend. After it flashed over him, the light shut off altogether, and the truck pulled off and left immediately. My boyfriend and I were shaken up. Once I regained my vision, I drove us back to his apartment, wary of the cars around us. We told his dad about the strange occurrence, and he said it's a good thing we didn't get out of the car, that people got murdered all the time from this stuff. We thought it was just weird, but thinking back on it, that driver probably saw me and targeted me. Once they realized there were 2 people in the car, though, they didn't want to deal with that and left. They really wanted me, it seems like. But what do you all think? There was recently a big hailstorm in my area that did a lot of damage to people's property. As usual, a swarm of fly-by-night roofing companies and Mr. Fix-Its came crawling out of the woodwork in search of a cut of those juicy insurance checks. We lucked out, though. While most of my neighbors suffered all kinds of damage around their properties, we had little to none. I think a lot of it had to do with my solar panels and the angle at which our cars were parked. Our older car did have a few dents, but nothing worth getting upset about, and I couldn't see a single mark on my truck. When you compared that to my neighbors on the side of the street, many of whose cars were so bad they were written off as totaled, I couldn't really think of any other reason. When it came to our roof, it had only been a couple of years since ours had been completely replaced after battling the insurance company for a long time. I submitted a claim again, and it was finally approved. Then, maybe 6 months passed before we purchased the panels, which covered 85% of the roof. I doubt the shingles had even had a chance to settle yet, a process that usually occurs in the heat of the summer. Clearly, we were not in need of any repairs around my home, but this hadn't stopped the dime store repairmen from harassing us constantly. In the span of only a week, 6 different individuals and companies came to my door. I was nice at first. I simply told them my roof was new, and I didn't need their services. Most of them got the hint and went away, maybe leaving their card behind. But a few tried to convince me I was wrong. That kind of behavior is what really gets on my nerves. When I pointed out the roof couldn't be damaged without also harming the panels, they realized what kind of person they were dealing with. This put an end to most of the visitors. No one was tricking me, or so I thought. Then the man who would prove me wrong showed up. It was 2 or 3 days after the storm. I just happened to be out, and when I returned, I found a business card and a flyer stuck in my screen door. The name on the card was not familiar to me. I noticed he represented my own insurer. I wondered why they would need to send a rep to speak to me. They had to have known they had just paid for a roof not that long ago. I briefly thought about calling, but it didn't seem worth the effort. I'd just mention it to the guy if he ever came back. This is about the time scammers began showing up. The next few days were a constant flood of cowboys and independent contractors knocking at my door. I got really annoyed at the chaos pretty quickly. When the insurance rep returned the next week, I wasn't as kind as maybe I should have been. In spite of this, he was understanding and thanked me for the information. With that, I assumed everything had been settled. Another few days went by. I ran into a neighbor while walking my dog, and we got into a discussion. He joked about me changing my mind. I ignored it at first, but something in my instincts told me there was more to it than just an offhand comment. I asked him to clarify his meaning. He told me he'd seen a man with a ladder and clipboard around my property. and even spoken to him earlier in the day. His description of the man sounded very similar to the insurance rep. That made me furious, seeing as how he knew the situation and had no reason to be there, especially while I was away at work. I cut the walk short and returned home. That man owed me an explanation, and I wanted it right then. I called the number on the card and was connected to the main operator. When I asked to speak with the guy, she hesitated for a moment before transferring me. After briefly being on hold, a female voice came on and asked me again who I wanted to talk to. I told her the rep's name, and she informed me the man had retired and was no longer even with the company. I assumed she must have misheard me, so I spelled the man's name out fully to make sure she hadn't. She was adamant he'd retired over a year ago and could help me no further. None of this made any sense. I was getting frustrated. Why was I being lied to? I told her everything that had occurred. The card, him showing up without notifying me, everything. She apologized for all the issues I was having, but swore that she knew for a fact he had not been at my home. I was losing my cool. It sounded like she was calling me a liar. I demanded she take it back. I was prepared to cancel my policy if she didn't. She assured me that was not her intention. I could hear the reluctance in her voice and began to sense something strange. I prodded and pushed until she gave in. She told me that the man on the card could not have been at my house because not only had he retired almost 2 years ago now, but he had been forced to do so because of a terminal illness that had killed him. After hearing all this, I had a hard time accepting it. I foolishly asked for proof. She raised her voice and said they had been close friends. I could hear her beginning to sniffle and realized that maybe I had gone too far. I apologized and explained my confusion and concern. After speaking a little while longer, we realized it was a man posing as that employee, possibly to appear more professional. He had received some cards from the rep in the past most likely, and now was handing them out to me. I finally cooled off. The entire situation was clear to me. He had used the information gleaned from a seemingly casual conversation to try and plan a break-in of my home. I had given him all types of information, including when I worked. He must have been in the course of a robbery, but was scared off by the sight of my neighbor. I never thought I'd be grateful to anyone for being nosy, but it appeared that I benefited from it greatly. All of this is just conjecture, of course. Without any proof of forced entry or the like, though, it's gonna have to do. Looking back, I feel stupid of being so trusting of some random stranger. He must have known the card would work on some idiot. Turns out I happen to be that exact idiot. It also explains why he was so forgiving of my brashness in light of what occurred. I no longer speak to strangers coming to my door for obvious reasons. I encourage anyone hearing this, should they be so unfortunate to have severe weather in their area, to be very wary of the people it attracts. I thought I was wise to all the tricks, but this really proved me wrong. If you don't contact anyone to come to your home, they shouldn't be trusted. There are a lot of underhanded people out there, and their numbers will only grow. Make a plan and follow it. Otherwise, you may not be as lucky as I was. Back when I was probably about 10 years old, I remember that the school I went to was pretty large, and I had a lot of friends there. One day, though, we went on a field trip to the city to watch some sort of dance thing, I think. It was in a large theater, and there was a dance performance on the stage. Our school was taking several classes there, probably a little over 100 kids. I rode on one of the buses with my class to the city, and then we were all dropped off. We went inside the theater, which had a very old-looking lobby. We went into the auditorium, and our teachers told us where we were all supposed to sit. I sat right next to my best friend Jake. We were on the first level in the far back row, and at the end of it as well. Pretty soon, the dance started, and we watched it for what felt like a really long time. I'm not sure exactly how long it was, maybe an hour or so. Soon enough, Jake and I got kind of bored. I was trying to keep myself from falling asleep. I guess I just wasn't a huge fan of the ballet. Jake suggested we could just get up and walk around for a bit. This seemed like a really good idea to me. Because of where we were sitting, we were really close to the door and wouldn't disturb anybody by getting up. In fact, most people probably wouldn't even notice. Jake and I got up and left the auditorium to go back to the lobby area. It was completely empty now. We walked out of the lobby down a hallway. It had bathrooms and some benches and other stuff. We walked through there, and then there was a staircase going upward. We were curious about that, so we started going up the stairs. They led to the second level, which was basically another lobby. It went to the seats on the upper deck. We explored a little bit more. There were some other cool rooms up there. There was a small area that had lots of pictures of performances that had taken place in a theater. There were also many other hallways and rooms as well. A few people were around, but it was not very many. It was interesting for us to walk around and explore. Much more so than the ballet, I thought. As we were walking around, I remember noticing this odd woman on the second floor. She had shorter blonde hair and was wearing a winter hat. As we were walking around, she seemed to be following us. At first, I thought she must have worked for the theater, and we weren't supposed to be walking around these areas or something. I knew she didn't work for the school at the very least. Jake and I decided after a while to go back down to the first floor. When we did, the woman stayed a ways behind us, but followed after us. She didn't approach any closer, and didn't try to say anything to us either. I remember that Jake went to use the bathroom on the first floor, and I stood around in the lobby waiting. The woman was just kind of standing around in the corner, looking toward me. I didn't want to ask her what she was doing, but it did seem kind of strange. After Jake got out of the bathroom, he came over to me and sat down on a bench in the lobby. That way we could talk and wouldn't have to be quiet. I noticed the woman had sat down in the corner of the room and was just looking at Jake and I. We talked to each other for another hour or so, then figured we should head back to the performance. When we got up, the woman was still sitting there in the corner. At this point, I was really assuming she must work for the theater in some way. Maybe she thought that Jake and I were up to no good. I did think it was really weird, though. We went back to our seats. I don't think anybody had even noticed we were gone for so long. We watched the rest of the performance, which went about 2 or 3 hours more. When we got up and left with everybody else, the lobby soon became very crowded. We each had to meet with our classes and take attendance before leaving. When we were out in the lobby, I noticed the woman looking at me from the distance. This was all so strange. As soon as we left the theater, we boarded our bus, which was parked out front. There were 5 buses in total, all parallel parked on the side of the street. After getting on, we didn't leave for another 10 minutes. Of course, the teachers had to make sure everybody was actually there, and had all their stuff, over and over again. At first, right after getting to my seat on the bus, I saw the woman walking outside. I figured that was that, and I wouldn't see her again. Right when we were about to leave, though, I saw a car pull onto the street behind the buses. It was the very same woman that was driving this car. This was way too strange. After we left, our bus was the last one in line. I was sitting in the second to last row and noticed this woman was driving behind us the entire way back to school. I thought this was so strange. I kept looking back. Time and time again during the bus ride, she was always right behind us. When we finally made it back to school, she did not turn into the parking lot, but kept going. I went back to school, and when the school day was over, my mom picked me up. I didn't notice the woman after that. After that day, I never saw her again. I'm really confused by who she was and what she was doing. So I just want to say that some people really do suck. I know that may seem like a horrible way to start a story, but it's true, and you'll see what I mean. A few years ago, my wife and I decided to take a road trip for our anniversary to see the Grand Canyon. We lived about 10 hours away, but neither one of us had ever gotten into a car and drove up to see it. That became the destination of our first wedding anniversary, so we could check that off her bucket list. The trip started great. We stopped at some diners and shops along the way. When we arrived, we started hiking and exploring. I'll say this, we're about as beginner as it gets when it comes to hiking. So when I say we went hiking, it was more like walking around. My wife was able to find a campsite online where we were allowed to sleep in the back of my truck under the stars. The word campsite sometimes implies that a lot of people will be surrounding you, but there wasn't anybody even close to us. The night was beautiful, romantic, and I would even dare say perfect, all up until this point. We were lying there together staring at the beautiful night sky. At this point, I didn't even have any idea what time it was. I knew it was getting late, but that didn't really matter. I was just happy being with my girl. After a while of talking, I could tell she was about to pass out soon. Her voice started to get hoarse, and she started to nestle into my chest. Eventually, she fell asleep. Of course, I wasn't tired at all. I tried my best not to wake her up. I reached blindly into my bag to find my phone and decided I was going to watch something on it until I got tired enough to go to sleep. Before I could even get anything set up to play on my phone, though, I heard the sounds of shushing. I figured I must have been hearing things, since being outdoors overnight was not something I was accustomed to. I stayed quiet for a little bit, trying to listen in to the eerie quietness of the surrounding area. Just as I was about to move on from my paranoia, I heard what sounded like movement on the outside of my truck. I was trying to quietly search through my bag for a pocket knife. I knew it was in there from work. I was struggling to remain quiet as I did so. Finally, I got the knife and sat waiting for someone or some animal to show itself. I sat quietly for a few minutes. I could hear the sound of the wind blowing in the air. After a minute or two, though, I realized that wasn't what the sound was. It wasn't wind at all. It was the sound of air leaving my vehicle's tires. I got up and went to look. The tires were nearly flat. Before I could even react, someone came from the front of the truck, tackling me to the ground. I think I took 2 punches to the head. Honestly, it had me spinning a bit. I laid on the ground, dazed and confused. I noticed the man got up and went to the back of the truck. I tried to get up fast, but my body felt like jello. I heard my wife scream. The man kept saying to stop screaming and relax. Once I heard her, though, the adrenaline gave me the strength to get up to my feet. I rushed over to the guy and pushed him down. I couldn't believe my eyes. I knew exactly who this piece of shit was. I'm not even kidding. It was my wife's ex-boyfriend from high school. That's right, I said high school. They had been together 10 years ago for like 6 months. This guy had been so obsessed with her ever since. I'd had some unfortunate incidents with him, but nothing like what she had gone through. She'd blocked him countless times, called the police on him, even had him arrested a couple times. This jerk even tried to break up our wedding. Ever since our wedding day, though, we'd had no incidents with him. I'm not sure why we thought this. but we thought that maybe he had finally moved on. I stared at this guy laying on the ground and told him to get out of there right now. I held my little pocket knife directly pointed at his throat. It didn't occur to me until afterward that this guy definitely had a knife as well, since he'd slashed my tires, but he didn't present it during the entire ordeal. As I tried to seem as intimidating as possible, my wife was already on the phone with the police. I guess I shouldn't be surprised anymore, but he didn't leave. He didn't care at all. He just kept saying, "Can we get out of here now? Come on!" At this point, I was terrified. This guy was absolutely nuts, and given our location, I had no idea how long it would take for the police or park rangers to get there. My wife just kept screaming for him to leave. As I stepped to the front of the truck, just waiting for this guy to charge me again, I started to feel dizzy. I held my ground. He walked away, then came back and started to shout the same things he'd been yelling about the entire time. He kept pacing back and forth. I didn't want to move or potentially make things worse. To my surprise, the authorities showed up in less than 15 minutes. Let me tell you though, those 15 minutes may as well have been 15 hours in my mind. They arrested him and he screamed obscenities the entire time. Obviously, we pressed charges. This time, he got more than just a slap on the wrist. That was the last time my wife and I went camping though, and it probably will remain the last time as well. It's been years since that ordeal, and we've never had another incident with this guy. It took all those years, but she was finally able to get a restraining order on this creep. He was somehow able to avoid serious legal trouble all those past years, and that was a real eye-opener for me. The guy was clearly dangerous and had a warped perspective of reality. Either one of us could have been seriously hurt, but thank goodness we made it out with no damage other than some mental scars and 4 deflated tires. I won't lie though, every day I'm still on high alert because you never know when someone that crazy might come back. If he does though, this time I'll be ready. One time back when I was a kid, I was left home alone and told to clean the house. I think I was about 12. I don't remember where my parents were. I just know that I was all by myself and I had chores I was supposed to do. One of those was to vacuum. Our house was all carpet in every room beside the bathrooms and kitchen. It was sometime in the late afternoon, but not quite dark out yet. I started cleaning by picking up the things on the floor that would get in the way of the vacuum cleaning. Then I hooked it up and started vacuuming. I remember our vacuum cleaner was really loud, but it was also very effective. I would always begin at one end of the home and methodically work my way down to the other end. There I would start doing the bedrooms. I was vacuuming and about 30 minutes to an hour went by. I'm not sure exactly how long it was. I started to hear a strange noise, but I couldn't quite tell what it was or where it was coming from. The vacuum was too loud. I couldn't even be sure I had really even heard anything at all. I ignored it at first, but as I began to hear the noises again, I shut off the vacuum and listened in. I didn't hear anything. Things appeared to be just fine. I turned the vacuum back on and kept going. By now, I'd almost made it to the hallway. Several minutes later, I heard another strange noise. This time, though, it was much louder. I knew that something was going on. I turned the vacuum off again, and this time I continued to hear the noise. It was the sound of a door opening. I believe it was on the side door of our home. It also may have been the front door. I figured I must have forgotten to lock it or something. I was in the hallway at this point and quickly ran to my bedroom and locked the door. I instantly had a bad feeling about this. I was scared, so I ran into my closet and hid there. The house was silent. Now that I had hidden, I didn't hear anything. I was freaking out. I didn't know what to do. I had no cell phone back then because this was years ago. We just had a home phone that was in the kitchen. I knew it couldn't be my parents. They weren't supposed to be back for another hour at least. Plus, it was them. They would have said hi or something. Out of nowhere, I began to hear footsteps in the hallway. Just barely. Somebody was walking quietly right outside the door. I couldn't believe it. Whoever was out there tried to open my bedroom door. I'm really glad it had a lock on it. After unsuccessfully trying to enter my room, it sounded like the person was walking away. I couldn't really hear anything though. After a few seconds, I was too scared to even move. I remained hidden inside my closet, where I stayed for at least the next hour. I didn't even get out when my family finally came home. I heard them outside, and only when I was absolutely sure it was them did I leave my room. When I found them, I told them exactly what happened. I remember my parents went all around the house looking for the intruder, but he was already gone. He must have left a while ago. We didn't bother to call the cops or anything. After that, nothing like that happened again. I don't know who the person was or what door they entered through. I always figured I'd left the door unlocked, but I'm not sure how they knew that to just walk right in. It still freaks me out though, knowing they didn't take anything and basically just went right to my bedroom, then left immediately once it was locked. This is something that happened just a few weeks ago. My wife made me go out and clean the garage. It's been my place to store my junk, and it was getting a little bit out of hand. We live just outside the city in a decent neighborhood, and our garage is big enough for 2 cars. It's attached to the house, however, we only park 1 car in the garage, and the rest of the space I used. I went out there on Saturday and started to clean it out. I had the garage door open and was taking some things out to the shed in the backyard. Other things I was throwing away in the garage and organizing the rest. It took several hours for me to go through everything. I remembered at one point when I was inside, there was a guy walking down the street. I just happened to notice him and didn't really think too much of it. I didn't recognize him or anything, and not a lot of people just randomly walked by, but it was not entirely unusual. For some reason though, this guy seemed to stop right in front of our driveway. On the side of the street. Now he was about 75 feet away from me or so. After stopping, he started to look in my direction. I was still cleaning at first, until I realized this random guy was just standing there at the end of the driveway, staring at me. He appeared to have dark hair and was of average height. He was wearing a bright red shirt. I stopped and stepped out of my garage and called out to the man. "Hi, do you need something?" I thought maybe he was going to come up and talk to me, but as soon as I started walking out to him, he immediately turned and started moving down the street. He continued in the direction he had been walking in before he walked out of sight. He was going fast too. Soon enough, I didn't know where he'd gone. I thought that was really weird. I went back into my garage and kept cleaning out things. I finished probably less than an hour after that. It looked much better than when I had started. My wife came out and inspected and was quite happy with the way things had gone. We went back inside after. Several hours later that night, I remember we were in the living room watching a movie. I was locked in on the TV screen, having some popcorn with my wife. Suddenly, she said, "Who's that?" I looked over and saw she was staring out the window our couch was right up against. I turned around and looked as well. There was a man standing in our front yard, right in the center of it. It was very dark out and sort of hard to see, but the man was just staring through the window at us. It was really creepy. When I looked closer, I realized it was the very same man as before. I told my wife I'd seen this guy earlier today when I was cleaning up the garage. He was just staring at me back then, too. I got up and walked over to the front door. I opened it and started to go outside. As soon as I did, though, the man ran off like he was a deer or something. He ran back onto the street and quickly out of my sight. My wife and I were both very confused as to who this guy was and what he was doing. I didn't know him at all. He wasn't a neighbor or anything I could recognize. The fact that he returned hours later at night to my house was really concerning. We hoped that he wouldn't be back. We finished the movie and checked out the window several more times in the process. We didn't see any sight of the man, and the yard remained clear. After that, we went to bed. Our bedroom is at the back side of the house. It didn't take me long to fall asleep like usual, but I randomly woke up in the middle of the night. This rarely ever happened to me. When it did, I remember sitting up alert right away and looking around for what had awoken me. Then I saw the window, which looked out to the backyard. The same man was standing there, right outside and looking in. It was the creepiest thing I'd ever seen. I turned on the light, and instantly he moved away again. I got up and ran to the back door. I threw it open and saw the man sprinting out of my yard. I yelled at him to leave us alone and to never come back. I'm sure that he heard me, but I don't know if he cared at all. When he was gone, I went back inside and covered all our windows up. Then I went back to sleep. After that night, we've been sleeping with all the windows covered, and I haven't seen that man ever since. I'm really hoping it stays that way. This happened when I was a kid. I believe I was about 12 years old or so. I was cleaning my room one night because my parents made me. It was pretty messy and getting kind of out of control. There was a lot of random clutter, such as clothes, books, and some old school stuff scattered about. I cleaned the way that I always did, which was to take everything and toss it underneath my bed and in my closet. It didn't take very long, and I got the job done. I remember as I was doing this one night, out of nowhere, I began to hear a strange scratching sound coming from my bedroom window. The window faced mostly our backyard, but sort of a part of the neighbor's yard as well. Well, when I looked over, I saw staring right at me through the window was a random person wearing a clown mask. It was a really scary-looking one, too. I completely freaked out. I ran out of my bedroom and into the living room, where my parents happened to be. I told them there was a clown at my window. They were obviously very confused at first. They went to my room to investigate, but of course, when they got there, the clown man was already gone. We looked out the window, which could see much of the backyard area. Not all of it, though. We didn't see him at all. It was also nighttime and dark out, though, so it was possible that we had missed him. My parents decided to call the police, and I'm really glad that they did. We waited for them to arrive. I was scared the clown guy was going to come back. Thankfully, he didn't seem to. We spoke with the officers when they got there. I showed them where I was and told them everything that happened. They went outside and searched our entire property. Unfortunately, the clown man had already escaped. They did, however, find his mask behind a bush. It was laying on the ground. When they showed it to me, I was really freaked out. After the police left, I had a hard time getting to sleep that night, but eventually I did. I just remember I kept looking over to my window over and over. Luckily, the clown did not return. In fact, I never saw him again after that. I still think about it all the time, though. Who was that man in the clown mask, and why did he choose our house? There were 100 other houses nearby. Was it random, or was I targeted specifically? I guess I'll have no way to ever know. Right off the bat, I'd like to say that this incident is one of the few that have truly stuck with me. Although this took place in January of the previous year, it definitely keeps me awake at night. It seems surreal to me that so many weird things happen to people on a daily basis, and I never imagined them happening to me either. Anyway, I was staying abroad due to college, and there wasn't a single thing that had irked me or creeped me out at all. I lived in a relatively populated area. There were a lot of young women in my apartment, and even older women as well. I felt safe in my own home. Walking the streets was also safe, since there were always quite a few people around. There were apartments, parks, houses, full-time stores, and even small cafes. I'm pretty sure there were small motels too. Regardless, it created a pretty decent image of the area. Although the university taught the lessons in English for all the foreign students, I still wanted to learn the language to respect and experience the culture. It was really fun, and I made quite a few friends in those classes. One day, I was walking to a convenience store from class. I remember being pretty dazed and tired. It was around 8 p.m. or so, and the class had ended a while back. Since I had some once-in-a-lifetime leisure time, I decided to explore the place a little. I knew my way around and was feeling pretty confident about the routes and all. As time passed, I walked further and further, and eventually reached a giant road with empty plots of land off to the right. Don't get me wrong, it was a residential area, and I can even hear noises coming from a couple of houses nearby. This is where it got a little weird. There were a bunch of houses, but as you kept walking toward the city and all the hustle and bustle, there was a secluded area of road and street lights. The convenience store was 4 kilometers away approximately. I was feeling uncomfortable and nervous too, because of a previous incident I'd had walking this stretch. I decided to stop and look around a little. There was nothing out of place. I decided to start jogging to get through this part a little faster. I was looking side to side and even back a little too. Not even 30 seconds passed by, when suddenly I bumped into someone. I felt a feeling of dread rush over me, and my hair stood on end. My palms started shaking. I apologized like crazy, simultaneously backing away and getting ready to bolt out of there like I was in the damn Olympics or something. The person was in front of me and started walking toward me in little steps, doing this weird swaying motion. It was almost like something out of a cartoon. While swaying, the person just repeated, "What the fuck?" over and over again. I say person because I genuinely couldn't tell if this was a man or a woman. They were wearing a large mask that covered their face entirely, as well as a hoodie and sweatpants. Their voice was muffled. The person started swearing and doing the weird swaying motion while reaching into their pants pocket. I saw a glimpse of something shiny. My instincts kicked in right then. I took the chance and fled that damn place. I looked back and saw them pulling out a knife behind me. I went to the store and told the clerk. They called the police and found 2 shoes in that spot, as well as the mask apparently. I never found out who that person was or what they wanted. I never saw them lurking around in the empty lots either. There were no bushes to hide in, and the light wasn't all that scarce, so I have no idea how they snuck up on me like that. I'm just glad I was safe in the end. So this story really traumatized me. It happened about a year ago, on my way home from college. My parents lived 6 hours from campus, so I decided to drive home after my last day. I wanted to spend the summer at home and prepare for my senior year in the fall. Unfortunately, my summer break had to start with a memory that I'm sure will be seared in my brain for years to come. My last exam ended around 4, and I decided to get some dinner with a few friends that I probably wouldn't see again for the entire summer. We hung out a little later than I wanted to, and I didn't start the 6-hour drive home until after 9 p.m. I was looking at getting home at around 3 a.m. or so, which my parents were obviously not thrilled about. The drive wasn't that bad, though. From the restaurant we ate at, it only took about 10 minutes to get to the highway, and then it was basically a straight shot to my hometown. I love to drive, especially at night. The traffic is light, and there's something about just traveling great distances in a vehicle that really makes me feel alive. I could sit alone with my thoughts, or jam out to some early 2000s hits, and just be happy as a ham, really. Luckily, I usually stay up late anyway, so I wasn't really worried about getting too tired or anything like that. When I hit the 2-hour mark, though, it started to storm pretty badly. It was that sideways rain that made it incredibly difficult to see. Deciding to be safe rather than sorry, I pulled into a rest area. It was one of those 24-hour gas stations attached to a fast food restaurant. I figured I would grab a Red Bull and maybe something to eat, then read for a little bit until the rain subsided. After all, for the first time since that school year started, I finally was not in a hurry. I took some snacks to my car, found a book in my bag, and started to read. What was nice about this rest stop was that it was kind of busy, even though it was 1 in the morning. I felt pretty comfortable sitting in the parking lot, reading as the rain fell down. Eventually, it started to stop and slow down to a light sprinkle. I really wanted to finish up the last chapters I was reading, though, since I only really had a couple of pages left. Right as I was finishing up, I began to hear a heavy panting outside the car, almost like a gasp of air. After a few seconds, I looked up from my book, only to see a woman pacing right outside. She looked hysterical and very upset. I hate to judge people by their appearance, but she looked a little bit crazy too. I just tried to ignore her. Within seconds of putting my head back down, the woman ran at my car. And started to slam on my window. She was screaming, and it seemed like she was trying to open my door. I couldn't be too sure about that, though. I didn't say anything. I just sort of looked at her and tried to process what was going on. She started screaming at me through the window. "Please, let me in. Let me use your phone at least. He's gonna get me." I didn't unlock the door, of course, but I did shout through the closed window back. "Who's trying to get you?" The woman just started screaming, becoming more and more incoherent and nearly impossible to understand. She was sobbing. It sounded like she was in complete desperation. Finally, she was able to formulate some words and began screaming again. "Please, I see your phone right there. Let me use it real quick." This is where I thought I was making the right decision. My friends at school always called me weak, soft, and too trusting. That's probably why every boyfriend I ever had walked all over me. I decided I wasn't going to be so trusting anymore, mainly because I didn't know this insane woman at all, but also because she wanted my phone. I could clearly see a cell phone directly in her hand. With confidence, I shot back, "Yeah, nice try. I can see the phone in your hand, so go away, or I'll call the police." I was feeling confident in my newly found backbone. I thought for sure that would scare the woman away. Instead, she started to freak out even more. She started to wave the phone around in her hand. I could see it was clearly destroyed with a cracked screen. She shouted that her husband had broken the phone, and that I needed to call the cops before he got there. Right at that moment, she let out a scream which still haunts me to this day. A big silver pickup truck came flying into the parking lot, running over the curb on its way in. At that moment, I could see the real and clear fear written on that poor woman's face, and I realized that she was not some crazy drug addict making things up, but someone who was really in danger. Before I could offer to lend a hand, she turned around and started to run. A smaller, muscular man jumped out of the vehicle and started to chase the woman. I got out my phone to call the police. Thankfully, at that moment, 2 squad cars had already pulled into the lot. They immediately identified the man and arrested him. The man didn't even seem to notice he was being apprehended. He just stared at that woman with these rage-filled eyes. Once they took the man, I stepped out of the car and made sure the woman was all right. I apologized profusely for not trusting her. She called someone for a ride, and I sat in the parking lot for a while longer, trying to calm down from what I just witnessed. I went inside to grab a coffee for the rest of my drive. I was speaking to the woman at the cash register for a little while. She told me the woman had run in there earlier, going crazy and yelling about her husband trying to get her, that they needed to call for help. The cashier told me they got dozens of crazy people in there every night, so she couldn't be sure who was telling the truth or who was just messed up. She called the police for the woman and then kicked her out of the store. She thought the woman may have been on something just like I did. I thought about that incident during the entire drive home. I realized I may have not been in direct danger, but the entire series of events really messed me up. The fear and pain I could see in that woman's eyes in that moment still makes my stomach turn to this day. The look of hatred in that man's eyes is something I'll never forget. I could clearly see he had serious, sinister intentions. I'll never forget the sight of him running full speed chasing that woman. To this day, I don't know what happened to the man or the woman, and most disturbingly, I don't know what motivated that man to do that night. Judging by his erratic behavior and demeanor, though, whatever he intended was not good. This happened back when I was a kid. I think I was around 8 years old, so some of the details may be a bit fuzzy. I remember the basics of what happened though. I was in school and my 3rd grade class was taking a field trip to the zoo. It was getting toward the end of the school year and the weather was really warm. I remember that everybody was really excited for this field trip. We left the school and rode the bus to the zoo. After we got there, I remember we started looking at all the animals. The zoo was a pretty large space and had several different areas as well. We got split up and went into different groups that would be in certain spots. After a while, the groups would move on to a different location. It wasn't like we were taking a tour. We could wander around a little bit, but we were supposed to stay within the area. We couldn't wander around the entire zoo. At least, that's what my memory of it was. As we were walking around and stuff, I remember being near the giraffes and looking at them for quite a while. Then we went into a building where they had a lot of fish and reptiles. Each place we would stay in for about 30 minutes or so. In my mind, everything was going great, and I was really enjoying it. But I do remember that while I was in the reptile and fish building, I was looking at one of the fish tanks. It was really dark in this particular room, and the building had several areas that were all connected. As I was looking at a big fish, I turned, and there was this man standing there who I didn't know. I wasn't exactly sure where he'd come from or how he snuck up on me without being noticed. I remember he was wearing these really big sunglasses. He asked me if I liked the fish. I said no and walked away. I wasn't trying to be rude. I just wanted to get away from this guy. The man didn't appear to follow me. Not long after that, I remember the group left that building. I remember that the 3rd spot my group went to was an area with some goats and other animals. All different kinds were there. They also had a few rides in this area as well. One was a merry-go-round with horses. There was also a train that basically went all around the zoo. The train seemed really interesting to me in particular, so I climbed aboard. It was really cool how it went through the entire area. There was one section that even went through the woods for a bit. I went on it with a few other kids. After the ride, we all got off, but I liked it so much that within a few minutes, we jumped back on for another ride. I remember I was sitting by myself in one train car kind of in the back. We left the station, and were going around the zoo when we got to the wooded section. I remember specifically seeing a man hiding in the woods. He was sort of behind a tree. He peeked out and saw me. I'm not sure if anybody else had noticed him or not. It would have been hard to see unless you were looking right in his direction. I recognized the man instantly. He was the very same man from earlier with the sunglasses. Obviously, I thought it was strange for him to be hiding in the woods. Soon, we passed him by, though. I was on the train for the rest of the ride, and soon it concluded. It went back to the station. After getting off, I remember the teacher in charge of our group called us all together and said we were leaving. I was really confused. We hadn't seen all the animals yet. We were quickly put back onto the buses and told we were going back to school immediately. It was then when I found out why we had to leave. Apparently, a strange man had been going around, trying to convince kids to leave with him. When he tried to get one girl to go, she declined, and I guess she reported him right away. The man then ran off when they tried to question him. They had to have all the kids evacuate the zoo. That's when I realized it was likely that very same man who I'd seen in the woods. That must have been why he was hiding there. I remember telling the school teacher about what I'd seen. I guess the zoo security was looking for him as well. We left soon after, and I didn't find out if they ever located him or not. I guess he could have easily slipped out through that wooded section. Looking back at the situation though, it really creeps me out, knowing why that guy tried talking to me. I'm really glad I just moved away from him immediately. I don't know if he would have tried to grab me by force or what. Either way, I'm glad he wasn't able to convince any kids to go with him, and that everybody in my class was all right in the end. This was a long time ago, when I was very young. I was still in school at this time. One day, we went on a field trip to a park. I don't really remember what park it was, or where it was either. I think I was around 7 years old, maybe. What I do remember is at the park where we were, a lot of us were playing around. I think I was playing with bean bags with someone else. My memory is a little fuzzy. I don't remember much about the overall look of the park at all. Our teacher really had her hands full, being in charge of a bunch of first graders. She was not really that close to the area I was at, probably helping out some other kids with something. I don't exactly remember any other people being around, other than our class and the teacher. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, I remember this woman approaching me. I had no idea where she had come from. She was calling me specifically by name though, almost yelling at me. I turned to look at her and realized I had no clue who this lady was. I don't even remember what she looked like. I think she had blonde hair and glasses. She came right up to me and said we had to go right now. She kept on insisting that I come on and that she wanted me to go with her right away. I remember asking why I had to go. I was very young, but I still knew better than to wander off with a random stranger. I was wondering how she even knew my name. She mentioned my mom's name as well, and said that it was okay with her. I remember at that point she had convinced me. I don't know why or how, but this woman knew me, as well as my mom. She reached out her hand to grab mine, and I was about to go off with her. Right when we started to leave though, I realized I didn't have my backpack. I remember I had this purple backpack that I really loved. and all my things were inside of it. I loved it so much that there was no way I was going to leave it behind. I told the woman I needed to get my backpack and tugged out of her hand. I started moving away, and I remember her yelling at me, saying that we had to go right now. I didn't really care though. I really wanted my backpack. I didn't see why I couldn't just run and grab it real quick. My backpack was at a table with some other kids' things, which is where my teacher was as well. As I started running away and sprinting for my backpack, the woman took a few steps to follow me. Then she stopped though. After I ran all the way back and grabbed up my backpack, I started to head back for the woman, but now she was gone. I looked around and couldn't see her anywhere. My teacher then asked me where I was going. I told her about the mysterious woman. She asked me where she had gone, but I didn't know. My teacher and I looked around for her briefly, but she had just disappeared. My teacher then called my mom, who said she had no idea who that could be. I remember that not long after this, the field trip ended abruptly, and we went back to school. I'm really glad I didn't go with that woman that day. I still don't know who she was, or how she knew me. It really gives me the creeps, knowing that she had been trying to abduct me. Back in 2016, my first husband and I decided to part ways. I found myself suddenly homeless as a result. Now, with only my check to rely on, anywhere I chose would be a major step down. While I searched, I stayed in a budget motel. This was a huge culture shock itself, and motivated me to find an apartment as soon as I could. Any free time I had was spent searching, and my determination actually soon paid off. Less than 2 weeks had passed by, and I found an old place near downtown. There was no application or deposit. I simply paid the first and last month's rent and moved in. Considering that I had little more than clothes, this process wasn't hard at all and didn't take long. The location wasn't ideal, but I figured it couldn't be that bad. The area had a low crime rate, or at least that's what the manager said. Even if he was lying to me, I was too relieved to care, really. Well, as you can probably guess, I wasn't even moved in a week before my car had been broken into. Not too long after, the family across from me was robbed while they were out. Crimes such as burglary were very common around the complex. About 2 months went by until it was my turn. I didn't really have much to steal, but I couldn't shake the feeling I'd been violated. My sleep was repeatedly interrupted by nightmares of men with guns and face masks. The lack of rest affected my daily life so much that I almost had several car accidents. After making a giant mistake at work, I was finally forced to admit that something had to be done. Once the unit manager agreed to let me out of my lease, I began searching for a new place immediately. During this period, the burglaries continued. It became such a common occurrence the police stopped coming out to investigate at all. Every night I had to remain in that place was a test of my courage and sanity. I was even more motivated than before to find a new place. When I did, I was almost declined because of the price. In the end, I realized I had to pay way more if I wanted security. I took that offering. My new complex was more like what I had grown up in. There was a gate with a code and everyone was friendly. I felt so much better after moving in. I must have slept like 13 hours on the first night there. Things were going so well that I was afraid something bad was going to happen that would mess it all up. Nothing did though. I was finally able to get settled in. I had been moved in for about a month or so when I met my first neighbor. She and I began talking at the mailboxes, and before I knew it, I'd been invited to a barbecue. In spite of some lingering feelings of fear, that I'd picked up from my last dwelling. I took the chance and accepted the offer. I'm glad I did. Now would be the event at which I met my current husband, Brad. Now I'll tell you about a man that I'll call the man without a name. I saw him almost every day for a month, and I'm sure I wasn't the only one either. I checked my mail every day after work, and I would see him doing the same thing. Or so I thought at the time. My curiosity eventually got the best of me though, and I tried to strike up a conversation with this mystery man. Whenever I would try, he would immediately zoom away. He was just too fast. After talking to a few of my neighbors, I discovered that they all had similar encounters. Other than a single woman's young son, nobody had ever exchanged a single word with him. Nobody even knew his name. Whenever anybody tried to interact with him, he would just disappear. The boy I asked said the strange guy had immediately changed the subject when he tried to speak with him and rushed off to his apartment. The location of this apartment was just about all we knew about this guy. The people that lived around him said they barely saw or heard from him. He really was a complete enigma to anybody who lived there. Any shred of information that became available immediately spread like wildfire from resident to resident. One lady was so desperate to know more about this guy that she threw herself at him, only to be rejected immediately. The entire saga took on a whole new angle when the man without a name disappeared all of a sudden. All sorts of theories and ideas were proposed, but none could actually be proven, obviously. We'd almost forgotten about him when the truth finally came out. It was far crazier than any of us expected. A month had gone by and I was coming back from the mailbox when one of my neighbors stopped me. They told me the man had been arrested. I asked her why and she wouldn't tell me. All she would say was to check the paper. I returned to my apartment and pulled out the local newspaper on my computer. You'll never guess what had happened. According to the article, the police had gotten a call from our complex that the unidentified man had been squatting in one of the abandoned units. The squatter was taken into custody with no resistance. When the officers searched the unit, over $5,000 in stolen items were discovered inside. The items ranged from cell phones to laptops to personal effects. More of the story was being released in the coming weeks. Under terms of a plea bargain agreement, the man admitted to regularly burglarizing nearly 100 apartments and homes across the city. One of the apartment complexes he admitted to targeting was the place I had fled from a few months prior. My mind was blown. He was the very same man that had robbed me. The odds were astronomical. The only place he hadn't robbed at was at the complex he was actually squatting at. I can only guess he thought it would bring too much attention to him. Little did he know that his attempts at laying low were exactly what made him stand out. The only thing I ever heard was how he was able to stay in the unit so long without being noticed. I have a few theories, but it's not important enough to include them here. To this day, it remains the single most creepy and astounding time of my life. I'm 29 years old and a woman, and this happened to me just 3 years ago. Now, I didn't live anywhere near my family at the time, but one of my family members was having something serious going on. I needed to be there for a few months at least. My options for living while there were either a hotel, which would be incredibly expensive, or to rent a place from a private owner. Finding someone who will rent out for only a few months is not exactly an easy task. Most people's absolute minimum is 6 months. I spent multiple full days looking online and basically had no luck at all. That was until I got to Craigslist. I knew there was a renting section on the site, but I was trying to avoid it unless absolutely necessary. Fairly quickly, though, I found a place not too far away from where I actually needed to be. It was a very small house, which hopefully meant much cheaper. They didn't specify a minimum lease period either. There was a phone number on the page, so I called it right away. An older-sounding woman picked up. She talked very slowly, but we had a conversation about the property and pricing. She was kind enough to let me only do a 4-month lease. Fast forward to a few weeks later. I arrived at the property. Again, it was very close to where I needed to be, but it was also very far out of the way from the main city, kind of tucked away into the woods. As we'd previously discussed, the woman didn't meet me there, but had instead left a key and some papers taped to the door. I went inside and took a look around. It was very old and kind of cramped. I did a bit of unpacking, then rested after the long drive. I didn't do much else other than watching TV. Around 7 o'clock, though, there was a knock at the door. I got up and checked my phone. I didn't see any text from the lady saying she was coming over. I walked over and looked out the peephole. There was a random man standing a few feet away from the front of the porch. I opened up the door and called out to him. "Hello, sir? How can I help you?" He had a serious face and explained that he was here for the fireplace cleaning. I looked over at his van that was parked in the driveway, right behind my car, then back at him. "It's a little bit late for that, isn't it? It's almost 7:30. He shrugged and said, "Well, that's what it was scheduled for." I told him to wait a minute, closing the door and walking back to the living room. I texted the lady and tried calling as well. I couldn't get a hold of her though. I then went over to the fireplace. It wasn't dirty at all. I didn't really know what to think. After all, this wasn't my house. Maybe it was just a cleaning service the lady had scheduled as part of prepping the home for me. This might sound odd, but fireplace cleaning is such a niche service that I thought the man likely wasn't lying. If he'd said he was a plumber or something generic, I might have been more skeptical, but it was so specific. I went back. When I opened the door again, the man was now standing right on the porch just a couple feet from me. It really scared me, not expecting him to be so close all of a sudden. Before I could respond or say anything, he told me he was trying to get out on time tonight and really needed to start right now. He stepped closer and put his hand on the door, gently pushing it a bit more open. Now I was getting really uncomfortable and rethinking everything. "Alright, yeah, just give me one more minute and I'll let you." I said that, trying to close the door, but the man kept his left hand on it and kept it open, knowing I couldn't close it if he wasn't going to let me. It seemed I didn't have a choice anymore. I let him in. I walked him over to the fireplace. He followed close behind me. He went up and looked at it only for a second. Right as he turned around, I took my keys from the counter and ran out to my car. The man's heavy footsteps rung throughout the house. I got out and into my car. He ran up to the window just as I turned it on, with his van still right behind me. I had to turn off the driveway and out into the woods, dodging the trees as I made my way back to the pavement. Eventually, I got back to the road. I called the police while driving, too scared to stop. When the officers arrived, he and his van were already gone. The front door was left wide open. It plainly showed he was not supposed to be there. Of what the police and I know, the man probably knew this house was being rented out somehow, and that whoever the new resident was, they wouldn't know if he was actually scheduled to come or not. I guess he was hoping to be let in from there. It's anyone's guess as to what he planned on doing, though. This was only a year ago. At the time, it had been a while since my last camping trip, and for a few months leading up to this, I was really just wanting to get out and camp like I always used to do. Finally, I had gotten some time off work and planned out a trip right away. There were some mountains not very far, about a 2-hour drive away from me. There were plenty of trails on them. I scrolled through the pictures, but eventually just decided to choose one. Once I got there, I wasn't too worried about the trail itself. I really just wanted to sit by my tent and relax. I drove up the mountain with 4 days' worth of camping supplies and food. This wasn't really a popular destination that people came to a lot, so there weren't very many parking areas. I ended up finding a plain dirt lot on the side of the road and just parked there. I then got out and started walking along the road until I got to one of the camping trails. On the very grayed out map, it showed the trail went a few miles into the forest, then up the mountain and split into 3 different paths that all led to various camping spots. I figured this would work, so I started the hike. It took just under 2 hours to get to the 3 paths I'd seen. I saw no difference in any of them, so I just picked the left one at random. About 30 minutes later, I came up to the camping grounds. It was an open area with not that many trees. Nobody else was there, and it didn't look like anyone had been there in a long time either. Everything had grown over, to the point where if there wasn't a direct path leading to this place, it would look just like any other spot in the forest. I tossed my bags down by one of the trees and started building up my camping area. I sat down on a log and made my lunch. After that, I just kinda sat there, writing in my journal and listening to the birds' songs. Once the sun was starting to get lower, I had to get a fire going to keep me warm. I got up and walked around the perimeter of the camping grounds to find sticks to use. Not too far from my tent, though, I found something quite strange. There was a path leading off into the woods. It was clearly not a regular trail, though. This was obviously a footpath, which had been formed by someone walking this same route over and over. Usually these types of paths grow over quickly when not in use, so the fact it was very clear and noticeable was incredibly odd. I finished collecting all the sticks and prepped the campfire, but something about that path there made me feel uneasy. I just wanted to check out what it was really quickly before camping the night right next to it. I grabbed my bag and started following this thin trail. The more I walked on it, the more I was sure someone had been there recently. After a 15-minute journey, I reached the end. Out in the woods just beyond this path, there was a small cabin. It looked like it was decaying and abandoned. The wood was splintering, and entire boards were missing. The door was left wide open. I walked up to it and looked around, wondering why this footpath would lead to this abandoned hut in the woods. It was far too distant for someone to stumble upon it out of curiosity. I peered in through the doorway. It was dark inside, and I couldn't really see much. I could tell that it wasn't empty. There was something inside. I was about to take a step in when a sudden voice behind me startled me. "Go away. Leave right now," a man said, very sternly, almost furious. I turned to face him. Standing about 10 feet away was a man. He told me to leave again. Without saying a word, I did exactly as he said. I walked away. I looked back once more, seeing the man standing at the edge of the path and watching me. I guess to make sure I was really leaving. Once I got back to my tent, it was already dark out, but I was not going to stay there. I quickly packed up and left, dangerously hiking in the pitch black with just a flashlight until I got back to my car. I don't know what was going on there, but what frightened me so much was that I was immediately sure the man I'd seen did not live there. He was wearing perfectly clean clothes, had no equipment, and there was no signs of him being out there for more than a couple of days. That makes me question why he was out there in the first place, and why he needed me to leave so urgently. How did the footpath even form if he didn't live there? Or was there someone else who did that? The whole thing has me asking 100 questions, and I don't think I'll ever get any of the answers. This happened March of last year. I was living in a really cheap apartment complex. It was all I could afford at the time. The apartment was tiny and my neighbors were a lot older than me. The vibe of the building was very much single dudes. One night in March at around 2 a.m., I was lying on my bed reading a book. I have a habit of staying up late. All of a sudden, I heard a loud banging sound at the door. Someone was trying my door handle as well. It sounded like someone was trying to kick the door in. I could hear it shaking with the impact. I thought it was someone annoyed and making some sort of complaint about noise, but I hadn't made a single sound in the last 2 hours. I didn't have the TV on and I wasn't playing music either. I'm not ashamed to say I was absolutely bricking it at this point. It was really frightening. I managed to muster up enough courage to creep over to the door and put my eye to the peephole. I saw a guy out there I had never seen before. He looked to be about 50 years old and had this totally insane look on his face. I didn't understand why this guy was so pissed off. I hadn't ever had any trouble with any of the residents here. I didn't really want to do so now either, but after 5 agonizing minutes, it was clear this guy was not going to give up hammering on the door. I thought it would be better to talk to this idiot. Before he woke up the whole damn building, I put the chain on the door and slowly opened it. The instant I inched the door open, a knife jutted through the gap. It danced its way toward me. I pushed on the door as hard as I could, and thankfully the owner of the knife seemed to be weaker than me. The door closed shut the whole way, and everything fell silent. I didn't get a good look at the guy's face. I shouted through the door, "Hey, what the fuck was that?" I never got a reply. I just heard someone board the elevator, and it departing. Could it be that someone had mistaken my room for another? Did someone on this floor have a grudge against another person? What kind of grudge provokes a spontaneous knife attack? I thought the residents here were all older anyway. None of this made any sense. Everyone in the building seemed mostly nice, and there had never been any trouble as far as I knew. I just couldn't figure it out. I couldn't do much about it either. I decided I couldn't do anything but get some rest. I had to work the next day anyway. Yes, I know I should have called the police, but I didn't do so. The following night, or if I should more accurately say the following morning, the same thing happened again. The same psycho showed up at my door, knife in hand. I was scared and angry now. The adrenaline was really pumping through me. "What are you doing? You've got the wrong guy. Who does this at this time of night?" I shouted all kinds of stuff, hoping something would make sense to this guy out there. I grabbed a big piece of wood. It was part of a shelf that had recently come down. I was ready to knock some sense into this guy. I was also ready to call the police. I just didn't know which was going to be the most effective first. I decided to take one more look at the peephole. The guy was just kind of standing there in a daze. I got a good chance to look at his face, and that's when I began to recognize him from somewhere. I had only ever bumped into him in the lobby a couple of times. He always made small talk with me and seemed like a really nice older guy. He'd even asked me if I wanted to have dinner with him one of those times. Well, I was really glad I didn't accept that invitation now. I think he lived somewhere below me. I couldn't get my head around this. Why was he now just randomly attacking me? I called the police right away. I kept silent all the while he continued to hammer on my door and try the lock. Anyway, to cut an incredibly frustrating story short, the guy was interviewed by the police when they arrived. I gave my statement, but as far as I can tell, he made it out like he was totally innocent. He pretended he knew nothing about what happened. The cops patronized me and kept asking me if I was under the influence. They warned me not to lie to the cops. Well, I knew what I'd seen. What frightened me the most is that he got away with it so easily. Would he do it again? The police wouldn't do anything about him, I realized. I bumped into him a couple more times before I moved out. He would just smile at me and put his hands in his pockets. I've been struggling to find a reason for his resentment towards me, but I could come up with nothing. Maybe it's because I was young or something. Keep an eye on your neighbors. That old saying, a wolf in sheep's clothing, can really be more true than you realize. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you liked the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any feedback for me as well, be sure to leave that in comments below the video. If you guys have a story you'd like to send in, or if you'd like to contact me for any reasons, there will be links to my social media in the description below the video, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has one, and how you'd like to be credited in the description below the video. Please make sure to include as much detail as you feel comfortable with, and try to use as much proper grammar as possible to make sure you have the highest chance of appearing in a future video. Overall, I think that's pretty much it for now, guys, so thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.